Amen. Amen. This is our third week of a series we've been doing called TNLC is. TNLC is. And this has kind of been around the celebration of our anniversary, our 12 years our 12 years of anniversary services. Well, we haven't done 12 years of anniversary services. You're like, congratulations. You know, it's like, and some people are like, we got married. It's our first anniversary. And you're like, no, you still got to keep going. You know, like you got to at least get through something for it to be an anniversary. This is around the 12-year anniversary of our church. And we've been starting out by asking this question. If you were going to fix the world, if you're going to save the world, if it was up to you, and we were like, it's you, Hannah, everything is down to you. And we're going to say, what's your plan to fix the world? What would your answer be? What would Marty Giancola's answer be to how to fix the world? What would it be? Would you do it by force? Would you do it by politics? Would you do it by social influence? Would you do it by education? Would you do it by health and fitness? What would you do to change the world? Because I think that you would probably agree with me, the world needs a little bit of changing. Did anybody wake up this morning, anybody read the news over the last couple days and be like, we are doing so good. I love everything. Keep it up. Like everybody's looking at it and going, something is off, and we're trying to figure out what's off, and then how are we fixing it? And so we then, as Christians, we look to the scriptures and we go, God, what is your plan? Like, you got to have a plan, right? Like, there's a plan. Like, please tell me, you know, like, you don't want it to be like Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, I have 12% of a plan. No, you're God. I need you to have all of the plan. What is the plan? And God's like, you ready for the plan? You're like, I'm asking you about the plan. You're like, you so ready for the plan? Like, I don't know why we're in this back and forth, you know? And the answer is, here's my plan. Start a church. And everybody, when we do this, is like, and? Like a big church, like a global church, like a famous church, like a artsy church, like a political church, like a this church. No. God's plan to save the world is through the local church. Now, let there be no confusion that I am somehow like subverting Jesus Christ, and Jesus is the same thing as the church. I would hope that discerning ears, but just in case, because we live in an age of headlines and internet clips, that Jesus Christ is the one who saves us and reconciles us between God and man. But when Jesus died and Jesus rose again, and he sent his followers with this power and with this message, the way he sent them out into the world was not with their blogs and not with their grams and not with their songs. He sent them out as a church. He sent them out as a church. So when we say the church is God's plan to save the world, there should be no place on the face of the earth that the power, the presence, hope, mercy, forgiveness, second chances, eighth chances, I see how ugly and screwed up and all your problems are, and I still love you. There should be no greater place for that than the local church. And so that is why it is God's plan to be used as the conduit. I mean, like, you go like, what makes you warm? Fire. And you're like, great, fire everywhere. No, you need fire in a container, or it's going to be able to hurt you and be misused. And so we want the power and fire of God, but to be in the church, so if nothing else, for 35 minutes, I can yell at you and try to be able to make sure that something in that breaks through all of the crap that you have gone through this week, all of the messages that you have heard this week. You are here 35 minutes 2 to 3 times a month. Nothing compared to the amount of time that you spend in front of other messages and other voices. But I got you until you say you got to go to the bathroom, so let's talk. And we're celebrating TNLC. And we're celebrating TNLC in a way that does not allow us to say that we have to disparage other people. I do not have to be able to elevate my family. I do not have to de-elevate anyone else's family. To be able to love my church does not mean that I have to disparage any other church. But can I ask, is that a weird thing to say? Like, let's celebrate TNLC. Let's celebrate us. High fives, everybody. I love me some me. Like, did I turn into Kanye West? Like, what's happening right now, you know? And especially when we talk about the church, because again, like we get back to Jesus, everybody loves Jesus, mainly because they don't pay attention to his teachings and they don't really hear what he said. They just like the idea of the guy, because he said some of the most divisive and hard to follow things in all of history. And then you get Jesus, and people are like, I love that Jesus. Just a nice white man, just, you know, with this blonde, luxurious hair, just giving all those lambs piggyback rides and feeding all those children. He's just wonderful. I love him. And then you get to the church, and you're like, oh, the church. This dumb thing over here. Oh, it's got all these screwed up things inside of it. And the church and Christianity has a mixed relationship over the last 2,000 years. Church has a mixed history with church. You probably have a little bit of a mixed history with church. I have a little bit of a mixed history with church, with this church, with churches before, with churches around it. I've been confused by it. Maybe you have too. I've been taught by it. Maybe you have too. I have unmet expectations from it. Maybe you did too. I've had unexpected blessings from it. Maybe you have too. I've been hurt by it. I've been healed by it. How can something that Jesus said he died for then, he died for his bride, he died for his church. How can something that Jesus said he died for, something he calls his bride? Now mine's not here. She's serving as point guard. She's no longer with it. No, she's just over in point guard. And Christians, I swear, after your marriage, you can call the person you married your wife. It's okay. You don't have to, you're 35, this is my bride. Like, I don't know, I'm team my wife guy, not like team my bride guy, but you know what? You do your own hashtags, okay? He called it his bride. You don't just randomly call women your bride. You don't just randomly call people like a bride. There's an intimacy, there is a love, there is a commitment to those things. How could something that he loves and cares so much for, how could it cause that many problems? Surely something must be wrong with it. We must not have figured it out quite yet, because if Jesus loved it, it can't have any problems, right? Jesus never loves things or cares for things that are screwed up and don't quite have their stuff together and don't quite follow what he's saying. Jesus never loves things like that, he said in sarcastic font. Well, what's a church? Not church, like church. I heard a story this week, Noel Motard, all of precocious 2 years old, heard a new song put on, and from the backseat of her car went, ooh, church. Good job, Noel, way to go. But what is church? And every time you read the word church in the New Testament, you are reading a Greek word, ekklesia. And it wasn't a word that was invented for the New Testament. It wasn't a word that was invented for that particular time. It was already used. It was mainly to describe sometimes political bodies or groups. And it really just means a called out assembly or a group of people. A called out assembly or a group of people. And if you're a white woman with Instagram, you call it your tribe. So many people are asking me about my tribe that I thought I'd share some of my tips with you guys. Because the reason that all of these things can happen inside of a church, a good church, a biblical church, a big church, a small church, a medium church, is because the church is people. And wherever people are, there is going to be sin and screw-ups and grace and mercy. As your preschool teacher taught you, here is the church and here is the steeple. But if you look at the building blocks of said church, you will find that it is really all of the people. I have found that the most unmet and unhelpful expectations, the most missed opportunities, come whenever you refer to the church. In my notes, it's in quotes as well, which is why I'm doing it in air quotes like I'm Matt Foley. There are over 350,000 churches currently in the U.S. alone. I am pretty sure they do not all act the same. I don't think you can ever say, here's how the church works. I mean, we're a modern, there's like traditional. How many of you ever been to a traditional service? And you've been going to church so long, it was just called the service. And you're like, wait, at some point in time, the music you started listening to became classic rock. You're like, wait, this is not classic rock, this is just rock. The station that we put on at the gym over and over again in the 90s, it's like oldies. Chris and I are like, excuse me, sir, do not agree with this. And so I think there's been traditional, and then there was the contemporary service, which meant there was one guy with an acoustic guitar who was getting lots of yelled at things from the people from the traditional service when they saw him walking in or out of that. And now I really think, they don't call them modern services, but I really think we're more like in modern services now. And I think that we are, I think the chapel is, I think Generations are. Just to give you like 3 right here in the area, Church of the Suncoast, Brave Church, and there are massive differences between all of us, yet if you just looked at people are like, it's church like you've never seen it. It's like, you have a band? Yeah. Pretty much all the chairs pointed at the band, maybe. And at one point in time, do you play like a lot of songs together, and then at another point in time, somebody talks for about 35 minutes? Yeah, but it's different. How? I don't know anymore. You know, like, it is different. It is different. And then you get to other churches where like they're kneeling and sitting like it's a boot camp class, you know, like you're up, you're down, you know, like that. Like you got to drink from a cup that everybody else drinks from. Like you got to say prayers to everybody else, and you're kind of going like, wait, are we on the same page? Are we all on the same page? So whenever we say the church, I think you are in a place where you are finding yourself in really, really unhelpful ways of thinking. If you go like, you know, the church, because the church isn't. I mean, there is one Wendy's in the Trinity area that I trust explicitly, and then there's one Wendy's at a different place like 5 miles away that I know has served raw chicken sandwiches to a friend. It's not like I'm like, you know how Wendy's are. You know, like this one has the really good fries and the really crispy bacon, and I'm gonna trust the one that I've gone to and have the experiences. And if we have that kind of diversion between Wendy's, which even agree that they're all Wendy's, how much more are we gonna have all kinds of diversity between the things that call themselves church, but they don't even have the same names of them? So what's different? Church to church, denomination to denomination, room to room, service to service, week to week. It's people. So if you're here or watching online and there's something about the church hurts or frustrated you, I would encourage you, if you have any desire to ever get past that and to not just stay in pain, stop saying the church and use the name of the person. Use the name of the people. The church, it doesn't work like that. And so what happens then is when you stay with there's disadvantage in you. Well, it's like, well, I've been to one church, you've been to them all. No, you haven't. You come to here one week, you come to here the next week, you haven't even been to church here yet. I mean, you go to one service, you go to the second service. Like, you barely even been here. You know, like, I got to go to a petting zoo, you know, and I got to come to like a third service on Easter. I mean, like, there was a world we almost had 4 services. There was a world we used to do 3 services in one day, over and many days in a row, and then we all fell into adrenal fatigue. You know, I mean, so to be able to say like, no, I've been to the church, no. And so let's talk about what that church is. Let's Tony Stark, let's take the small thing, let's expand it big, and let's look at it, because if Jesus called it his bride, man, it's got to be crucial. Man, it's got to be important. And people who are thinking like, oh, you know what, I think I'm just done with the church. That's you're saying is, Jesus, I love you. Your wife, oh, I got some words for your wife. I don't know about you. Like, I'm looking at Scott and Laura right here. I'm like, Scott, you know, you're awesome. Man, can we talk about how terrible Laura is? And Laura's just standing right there. And Scott's like, I don't think I want to have this conversation. And nor should you, because it's your wife and you love her. And you don't think she's perfect, but you don't talk about her like that in front of me, and you better not talk about her like that when I'm not in the room either. And so that's how we need to be able to think about Jesus' bride. I know it's not perfect, so every time it's not perfect, don't be like, oh, the church, oh, my stars and garters, the church has not been perfect. Of course it's not been perfect. But if the church is people, that means that you also haven't been perfect and I haven't been perfect. And so what do we do with that imperfection? And how do we be able to understand and have proper expectations of each other? So many relationships break down because of unmet or unrealistic expectations. Unspoken, unmet, unrealistic expectations, and some combination of all 3. So if we could ever get closer to being on the same page, at least about our expectations and what we should and what I want you to expect from me and us and what I want to expect from you and you, man, that's going to put us so much closer to being able to truly embrace the full joy of what the bride of Christ and the church can be in our lives. Now, the size that we are right now as a church, I think there's 4 levels of church, of our church. And I don't mean like, you know, like promotion level. I just mean like, I think the larger and smaller a church is, that might go up and down in terms of how many kind of orbits or areas of the church they are. And so here are the four that I think that we have right now. Number one, followers. By the way, none of these are negative. Followers, friends, fellowship, and family. Followers, friends, fellowship, family. Again, I don't think any of these are negative. So I'm not trying to give you like they're all three are bad, one is good. That's not what I'm trying to talk about. I think we have to get our expectations first. So let's start with followers. Let's start with orbit number one, followers. Matthew 8:1, large crowds followed Jesus as he came down from the mountainside. Now in a church, there's two reasons that you have this group of followers. Number one, people are coming to check out the church. They're coming to learn about Jesus. They're coming to learn about the faith. The second is that you refuse to come any closer. Now, of the four orbits, and this is a very good one to have. If you don't have this in your church, I think you are in real trouble. Okay? This is like I always tell people, if you're 45 or older and the music doesn't start feeling a little bit too loud for you, you're in trouble. Okay? Because you're about to be the youth group. You know, like you like once you get to 45 and above, you kind of want to be like, you know, the kids with their music and this rock and roll. Like you want that because youth always annoys the older generation. It always does. But if there's no youth around, you're like, oh, I'm not annoyed. But you also don't have life. And the more you're around people who are younger, the more you trick yourself into thinking that you're younger, and the more you feel younger, and the more you act younger, and the longer you live. So if you want to volunteer on Wednesday nights, you can talk to Pastor Colin and Jessica about that. Of the four orbits, though, this is the only one you shouldn't stay in. It's the only one you shouldn't stay in. It's an orbit you might always find yourself in, but it's one you shouldn't stay in. Now, remember, there's two reasons. Number one, if you are here this morning or watching online to learn about Jesus, to learn about the church, to check it out, to ask some questions, to get some answers, awesome. Fantastic. You are exactly where you should be. And we are very excited that you are here. Ask away. You won't offend us. You might offend us, you know, but but we're pretty tough. I've gotten questions like, isn't these things in the Old Testament, aren't they aliens? To like, aren't you a heretic? To like, why don't you support this? To like, why do you hate me? To like, why are you serving communion at every service? Why do you make it too easy to serve communion? Why do you sing? Why do you sing at the end? Why do you have cameras? I got answers for everything. And again, if you have any questions, my email is mason@trinitynewlife.com. Fire those off. The toughest questions you have. Look, there is no way that you were born with a download of all the information that you should have about the faith, which means that the only way that you're ever going to be able to get any information about the faith is to be able to ask questions and to be there. So if that's where you are in such a good place. And if you feel any frustration or any shame or any like, I should have this figured out already, stop. And just embrace where you are. You're in a good place. You just don't want to stay there. That's the other one. See, if you're in that orbit and you call yourself a Christian, that's like going to the gym, walking inside, standing there, and trying to get fit by osmosis. It's like going to a restaurant, standing there, watching everybody order the food, and never ordering or never eating anything yourself. You're there, but you're not receiving the full benefit of the purpose of it. It's like going to Disney and not spending an additional $3,000 on food and drinks. The Monteith and Branda family will be selling plasma if anybody is interested. You're missing the point. And when I say the point is joy, the point is hope, the point is forgiveness, the point is family, the point is fellowship, the point is freedom, the point is hurts, the point is disappointment, the point is misunderstandings. And you go, wait, I'm supposed to get into that? Oh yeah, because until you have those pressure points, you have no opportunities to be able to grow. Here's an example. If you've ever listened to a message, you probably heard a pastor say, you know the only way to build muscle? You put so much strain on the muscle that it tears. And until the muscle tears, it can't grow back stronger and healthier. And so you go, it's a benefit to be in a place with conflict? Yes, it's a benefit to be in a place with conflict, with barriers around you, so that the first moment that you get into conflict, you don't run out of it like I just ran out of the frame for broadcast. Because I didn't let them know that was coming, and I wanted it to be a dramatic example online at the same time. Oh, I follow the church online. I can't tell you. I don't know how many of our other pastoral team get this. When you get together with family and different stuff like that, they go, oh, I follow you online. Hey, everybody. I listen, I watch. And the danger of social media is that it gives us the appearance of feeling like we're connected without ever having to be connected to that person. You said happy birthday. By the way, if you just say happy birthday on Facebook with no emojis or no exclamation points, just don't even do it. And if you give them like a HBD, just unfriend them. You don't like them. You don't need to be passive-aggressively mean to them at that point in time. I'm giving you at least a 3 exclamation point, maybe a nickname, maybe try to work a GIF in there or something like that, you know? I mean, like anything like that that's happening. But I just mean like, but we're not doing that. All we're doing is following someone else's narrative. It's not a relationship. Why are you watching online right now? Why are you really? Did it become easier? Now, if you're in Jacksonville or Mississippi or you're in Nashville, and I understood you could not drive here this morning, although it's the air show, I'm sure there were planes flying around. Just kidding. But I wonder how many of us have fallen into this routine. It's just become easier. It's just a better rhythm for our family. It's just something I can do a little more consistently. There is nothing in all of Scripture that would align that with what you just said. The ease and rhythm of your family. I'm worried about gathering in person. Do you know when you're not going to be worried anymore? Or have you allowed a moving set of goalposts to keep you in a comfortable rhythm? I'm not saying this lightly, nor is this an easy question. But if you've stopped asking yourself and stopped putting a clear goalpost there, I wonder if it just hasn't become an easier rhythm. And we're staying at the level of followers. Because there's a deeper orbit. Friends. Why can't we be friends? Why can't we? Wait, friends. Didn't Pastor Chael just last week talk about we don't only want to be but a? She did, but you have to, it's not only a friendly church. It's not, don't ever be a friendly church. It's not like, hey, what's up, dummy? You want to be my friend? Like, we don't jump past friendly right into sticky. Ephesians 4:16 tells us this. Jesus makes our whole body fit together perfectly. And as each part does its own special work, it helps all the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy, growing, and full of love. It helps the other parts grow. Parts help other parts. So the whole body, not just the head, not just the tail, not just the middle, not just the appendix, not just the pinky finger, the whole body can be healthy, growing, and full of love. It's really tough to get into a I know their name situation with a church of more than 80 people. If you have any kind of friends, any kind of relationship outside the church, if you are in a church larger than 80 people, you're in a room of larger than 80 people. I don't know if you're in a chat room larger than 80 people, but you're at least in a room larger than 80 people. You're not going to be able to know everybody's I know their name and I know their situation here because you just simply don't have enough relationship slots to be able to keep all of them there. So to be friends and friendly in a church of this size, you have to then take a posture of living out of friendliness and doing the work of being a friend to them, even if you never know the exact contribution they make to you or you never know the exact contribution you're making to them, but you are still taking a posture of friendliness to everyone here. Sure, it might be annoying if people are like, I'm sorry, we haven't met. Tell me your name. And you're like, this happened like a couple years ago, and the person answered, my name is Brian Bell. I've been here from the beginning. And they were like, I felt so embarrassed. I'm like, why? The person was telling me, it was like, I didn't know your dad. It was like, you never met him. Why would you be embarrassed about not knowing them? We're too big for everybody other than Sharon and Sam to know everybody's name. They do, the rest of us don't. Hey, buddy, what's up, champ? It's both encouraging and it's comforting. And so if you're like, no, I want to be at a place where everybody knows my name, the danger of being that, it's good for community if you want the whole church to do that, but you're not going to have any evangelism. And the lost people aren't going to be getting saved. And you're in a body of water. You guys all live in Florida. You know this. You have a body of water with no fresh water moving into it. Is anybody, real estate agent David Bolton, is anybody looking for I'm looking for a house with some stagnant water behind it? No, it's not. It's always better to be asked than to just give the, hey. I'll take annoying friends over distant friends any day. There's going to be a lot of people in here that you know, but you don't know. That's okay. Everybody can't get into the family circle. It's impossible. It's psychologically, it's relationally, mentally impossible. So if you're like, I'm just so disappointed, I don't know everybody, you're disappointed in something that can never actually happen. So change the expectation. And go, I'm going to be friends, but maybe I'm weekly friends, maybe I'm monthly friends, maybe I'm like, hey, what's up? I saw you, friends. But that's where you have to start in church. And it's honestly where a lot of relationships will stay. That's not bad. And what it means to be friendly, to start picking up names and oh yeah, and be able to catch up with each other a little bit means that you've moved past Sunday morning attendance into this orbit of friends. And then once you get past friends, you can go into a sticky one, which our third orbit is fellowship. Fellowship. 1 Corinthians 12:18, the Apostle Paul writes, our bodies have many parts, and God has put each part where he wants it. He's put each part where he wants it. Verse 27, skipping down there. All of you together are Christ's body, and each of you is a part of it. Fellowship, the difference between friendly and fellowship is this is the part of the church where God chooses for you and you listen to him and you also make that choice. It's not like you're chained to it and you're trying desperately to get away from it and you just can't and you want to. This is the part where you know that God's put you into those people and you also want to be a part of these people. The other word that we said, the one that Matt Fucarino said a bunch of times in our video, community. Because alliteration is helpful. Connect, community, catalyst. There we go. But this is also the group that we expect to be able to help be contributors. Because you know that this isn't a place that you are attending, this is a place that you are helping to build. And it's not their church, it's my church. It's not Clayton's church, it's my church. It's not Shale's church, it's my church. It's not Mason's church, it's my church. It's not Casey or Colin or Kelly. It's not their church, it's my church. It's our church. Yes, serving and financially. Yes, I would expect you to be a contributor there, but also in faith, in love, in hope, in expectations, in prayer, and in discipleship. I am biblically arrogant enough to think that you need to have relationships in the orbit of your local church and not to have a bunch of independent and rarely overlapping smaller circles where you can put on one mask for one group and one mask for the other group, but you can have one group where you are fully known, fully loved, fully challenged, fully rebuked, fully corrected, fully built up, and fully supported. But when you have a bunch of smaller ones, you get to be whoever you want to in that particular moment on that particular day. And you see the joy, you're also starting to feel the challenge. Now, getting into a fellowship with people, that circle can go, friendly can be a pretty broad circle. It can be in the hundreds. Fellowship can be a little bit closer to that's probably you can still have that in a church, but that's probably going to be a circle closer to somewhere around 70 to 120 people. And again, even if you don't know the people, you can be in fellowship with them, even if you are not in we're having breakfast every other week kind of situation. Followers, to friends, to fellowship, to family. Family. Now, we take that fellowship and we move it into this idea of a found family. And this is where people who, you might have a lot of people that you would be willing to be in this kind of relationship with, but numerically it's just impossible. Sociologically, relationally, everything will tell you it's impossible to have this really with more than 15 to 20 people. And so, man, there's a difference between I don't have any family and I don't have everybody in my family. And what does this look like? Galatians chapter 1, verse 6. Chapter 6, verse 1. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Here's the key right here. Share each other's burdens. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. If you think you are too important, if you think your schedule is too important, if you think that your finances are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. The loving words of the Apostle Paul, you are not that important. This is the small, special group that you have, that you actually allow to help you live your life, carry your burdens, and care for your soul. Now, if you would say, look, I like coming to church, but I don't want anyone at church to really know my business. If that's actually true, there's a difference between I don't want to let everybody know my business. Understandable. But when you say I don't want to let anybody know my business, you are in a very, very dangerous place, mentally, emotionally, and relationally. You are going to continually feel isolated. People do not know you, and they don't. Because there's a part of you that no amount of them asking, no amount of them observing can get to. It can only be understood when you reveal it. It's not their fault. It's not their fault when they don't know. I just don't want people who think I'm a Jesus follower to know that I struggle and I have doubts. Oh yeah, no one ever struggles or has doubts, said no one who's ever read the scriptures. I mean, I think David is the example of all of this. Everybody hates me. Everything sucks. All right, I love you, God. You know, you're like, amen. You know, you're like, to the tune of, oh, God, why is it all terrible? And everybody hates me. Nothing's working for me. I prayed. I do all this kind of stuff. You haven't done anything. Fine, I'll follow you. Reprise. You know, you're like, what is happening with this guy? Paul beaten, Paul abandoned, Paul alone, Jesus, his back turned on him. You know, like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, could somebody take this burden from me? So if you're like, I just don't want people to know that I struggle, they know you struggle because they struggle. Or it's like a priest, you're like, I'm not Catholic, but everybody feels like they can only go to the pastor. Not even a pastor, the pastor. As if church is found in titles and positions and not in people. The person who is in your discipleship community, who has sat with you for years and years and years, when they go and pray for you, if you're in the hospital or there's a death of a family member, let me tell you something. That should mean more to you than me coming and praying for you. I will. But it should mean more that the person who has literally picked up your arms and their arms together is there with you praying. Let me tell you something. The prayers of a righteous person, not a righteous pastor, are powerful and effective. And the double-edged sword of family. Because we've done 2 weeks of TNLC is, and now this week and the next week is TNLC should be. Family. But not one only family. Family, 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 family. You guys know the word. Who are in a fellowship as part of a larger body of friends who are eager and waiting for people to be able to explore their faith. It's dangerous when you see spiritual family. See, the reason that we talk about spiritual family is because I was handed an inheritance. I've said this, I grew up going to church. I didn't grow up going to church. I didn't pick to go to the campus ministry that I went to when I was in college. I didn't know who it was. I didn't evaluate them. I didn't know anything like that. God just set me into this family. And the men who had founded that Every Nation movement put as one of their five core values, lordship, discipleship, evangelism, leadership development, and spiritual family. I didn't invent it. I was handed an inheritance. And because of that inheritance that I was handed, we created in Tallahassee, the church we were at before, a vast spiritual family of guys that are still, who have stood in each other's weddings and women in each other's weddings and still friends with today on boards and support each other and preach with each other. And some are lead pastors and some are not and everything like that. And the number one thing when we moved here was not how big the church would be and how would we pay for it, is there any way that we could replicate the kind of family that we had? But because it was an inheritance and not a principle, it was a part of who we are. So we began building like that. And now we have found family. People vacation together in here. People have decided not to move back to Michigan together in here. Other people have decided not to also travel the world together here. People have gotten married because they met here. People have had babies here. People whose friends their marriages are being arranged behind their backs are here. And so the people who have been here the longest, for the most part, have this deeper sense of spiritual family with each other. And when you see it and you don't have it, it creates a desire for it and then a deeper level of frustration that you don't have it. So it is a double-edged sword. Because it's a mistake to think that when you see it in others that you have to get it from them. I feel like Paul. I'm saying it sounds crazy to be able to say this. I have the privilege now of being one of our North American leaders in our Every Nation movement. I speak with a regular basis on one of the founders who's become one of the mentors. And when I was 22 years old, I could not have ever fathomed that this guy would be calling me and texting me and I would have all these guys' numbers. And I don't say that to be able to brag, but to say that is how it is now, and 20 years ago was not how it was at all. I didn't get spiritual family by sitting with the guys who started spiritual family. I saw it and I said, we're going to do that. And I wasn't the only one who did it. It wasn't because I was some special. There had to be others. And so if you look at other people, because is there anything harder than adult friendships? You're not good at flirting anyways. That's why people are online dating so much. You're going to be like, are you interested in this? No, bye. We're like in person. And then like it's the same thing with friendships. It's like, hey, if you're not doing anything later, like, do you like boating? Like, no, boating's dumb. You're like, oh, okay. Like, you think I'm dumb? Like, am I pretty? Do you want to raise your kids together? Like, adult friendships are so hard. And so if you want spiritual family, which I think we should push into, I just need you to know it's really, really hard and worth it. And here's what I think. I was kind of reflecting on this. Here's what I think it takes to be able to get them. If you look at somebody with spiritual family, their friendship is like a family, and I want that, here's what it takes. I think at least 5 years, if not 7 to 10. A willingness to say no to other relationships so that you can continually say yes to a few relationships. Not that you're not friendly with them, but I've got to really be able to dig in and press into these relationships. And to do that, I have to have time to be able to do that. Continual proactive communication, offering of yourself, and never expecting the burden of relationship and communication to be on the other person. A willingness to assume the best, push for clarity, and have tough convos. Because if you ever want to have strong family, you have to have times where it's been torn for it to be able to be put back together. But if you look at somebody and say, I want what they have with them, now we're in a little bit of a struggle. Because for them to start giving it to you means they have to stop giving it to somebody else. There is not a finite amount of spiritual family available in God's kingdom. There is not a limited number of close, intimate relationships. Don't be disappointed with relationships that stay in fellowship and never make it to family. This is a small, rare orbit that is hard to have more than 12 people. The goal is not to be able to move every relationship into this orbit. That is impossible. The goal is to make sure that you at least have this orbit. So here's your big step. Here's your big step to take, your action step, your big takeaway, your call to response. 2 words, move in. Move in. That's it. What orbit are you in? Move in. Each orbit pulls you in closer. Being in a closer orbit, it's a smaller one. It takes Mercury 88 days to orbit the sun. It takes Jupiter 12 years. And so you want to be able to be close, you want to speed up your relationships, you got to move in. Here's a couple ways to do it as the band comes up. You could get baptized and leave no doubt of your commitment to Christ before you try and commit to his bride. You could commit to him first. You could commit to coming more often on Sunday mornings. You could come and look for someone else and to help make them feel comfortable. You could join a serving team. You could ask for more responsibility on that serving team. You could choose to make your giving proactive and regular and not reactive and sporadic. You could come to a Friday night prayer meeting. You could go to a Tuesday teaching. You could ask someone else to go to lunch. You could ask someone else to go to coffee. You could send the text message to somebody else that you are waiting to hear for yourself. You can ask one of us. You can ask any leader, hey, what's the biggest need in the church right now? You could just open up your home for a discipleship community. You could join a discipleship community. You could decide today to come to newcomers tonight because we have more than enough food, like just a little bit more, but we have more than enough food. And if you're like, I don't want to wait until the next one, and I want to be able to get started now, you could go out to that green tent right after service. Sam and Sharon will already have your names memorized, right? That's a little pressure. Sorry, Sam. And they're going to be able to help you to be able to move in. And if you've done all of that and it hasn't worked, you got to do it again. I don't have anything else. How's that for love and care? See, the church is not going anywhere in God's plan. That's the thing about it. The church is not going anywhere in God's plan. And so if we have a struggle, if we have a strain, if we struggle with our relationship with the church, that means we got to deal with something because it's not going anywhere in God's plan. And so what we want to do is we've got to figure out what are our obstacles, our missed expectations, our unmet hopes. How do I deal with those, process those, be honest with them, confess them, move through them so that I can move into intimacy and relationship with the body and bride of Christ. Would you stand with me as we begin to pray? We begin to move into singing and response and worship. This is the question I want you asking in your communities this week. And if you're not in a community, you can ask it for yourself. Are you staying in steady orbit? Or are you finding ways to move in? Are you staying in steady orbit? Or are you finding ways to move in? Let's pray together. Father, thank you so much for your church. Father, thank you for your bride. Would you show me what orbit I am in so that I might move in? I thank you so much for the people who are here on the outskirts trying to be able to hear and listen and explore. Thank God for them. I thank you for the people struggling to find family, struggling to be able to push into fellowship, to learn, to go through the bumps and bruises of what that means. God, would you help us wherever we are to move in. In Jesus' name, amen.